Hey there, Postal here. So today we're going to be doing a preview of the Japanese tech tree line since we've got Marchinations for Japan going on. Like my previous videos on Marchinations, there's no gameplay, but I'll make sure to have gameplay from this line just throughout the week. Today we're just going to be talking about the tech tree itself. This is the smallest tech tree in the game, and so the video will definitely be a little bit shorter. So we'll start left to right and just go like we have previously. So the Japanese first line that we're going to talk about is the key line. This is the Japanese army line, basically. So for me, anyway, I was very, I knew about zeros and things of that nature. Well, it's the Japanese Navy line. This is a fighter line. In the game, the key line is very, very maneuverable, just like the zeros, but not quite as maneuverable. And because you lose that maneuverability, you gain a little bit of airspeed. You get a little bit of altitude performance. What's funny about the altitude performance on the key line up until about tier 8, I should say, is even though the altitude performance rating isn't very high, these particular planes can get high up, kind of like the Spitfires. So a lot of players will actually play the keys up to tier 8. Kind of like BF-109s as far as altitude performance, and I think that's a mistake. They can go higher up, but they don't live up there like a BF-109 or like a P-51. They're really good in the mid-range, in my opinion. And because they're good in the mid-range, they're actually really good at coming from underneath planes. Because you've got the ability to get up there, kind of like a Spitfire, but you can't necessarily live up there, if that makes sense. So you might see like a heavy fighter, 5,000 feet above you, 4,000 feet above you. If you've got the ability to boost up, you can boost up, take some really good shots, and then head on back down. The key line has some variations on the guns themselves, so there's really hard-hitting guns on this line. But for the most part, like you just kind of you just get more maneuverable and more airspeed as you go up. Key 84 is one of my favorite planes at tier 7. It's actually just a really well-rounded plane. Good enough for tier 7 airspeed. You got two 30mm cannons and two 20mm cannons, and so you've got that kind of ability to take chunks out of heavy planes. But you've also got the 20mm cannons, so you can still do your dogfighting thing, like the keys are also good at doing. What's really odd about this line is you get to the key 94, which is kind of more of the same. But this is actually the highest altitude performing plane on the line. You lose a lot of altitude performance when you get to the tier 9 and tier 10. These two planes are 30mm cannons only, and just two of them. And so they can be very, very frustrating for a lot of players. Any plane in the game that's just two 30mm cannons can be very fickle. And these are no exception. The difference with these 30mm cannons is they do tend to fire a little bit quicker than some of the other 30mm dual cannons in the game. So that is definitely helpful, but they're also shorter range. So you use your maneuverability, which the key 162s both have great maneuverability, especially for their tier. You see it doesn't lose a whole lot of maneuverability. Actually, I guess it stays right about the same, which is a big deal when you go to jets. Most jets lose a lot of maneuverability just from the ability to go as fast as they go. So you keep that maneuverability, but their altitude performance is very middling, very multi-role level, basically. Honestly, the tier 9 and tier 10, like, they're good enough planes, but there's so many other better fighters in the game at tier 9 and tier 10 that, like, I've got them, I've kept them just because, like, I got them. It took a long time to get them, right? So I'll be damned if I don't keep them. But for me, the planes before it were actually the better planes. The tier 6, tier 7, kind of the tier 8 are all better than the tier 9 and tier 10s on this particular line. Not that they're bad, they're just not my, like, I'd rather play a Swift if I'm going to have two 30mm cannons in a tier 10 fighter. Yeah. So for heavy fighters, they both kind of branch off of fighters, right? So I'm actually going to go towards the other fighter line here, which is the zero line, and then we'll kind of come back around to the heavy fighters. So this is the zero line. Again, it's kind of the line I was familiar with when I started playing the game, as Zeros were just kind of a thing that I knew of the Japanese. And these are super turny fighters, the most maneuverable fighters in the game for their tiers. That being said, they sacrifice everything for the ability to maneuver that tightly, and I don't think they're strong platforms because of that. They do have strong guns, but the problem is you have no altitude performance, and you have no airspeed. So I mean, let's just compare the Ki 84 really quick to an A7M. And I love the A7M. A7M for the longest time was my favorite tier 7 fighter in the game. I've set it up, you've got good maneuverability, right? Great maneuverability, in fact. Not that much better maneuverability than a Ki 84, and you lose, I've had to do a lot to boost my airspeed up to this point, and look at all the altitude performance that you miss out on. On top of that, you have 4 20mm cannons. You don't even have any 30mm cannons. Now that being said, they're very consistent because they're all the same damage distance. They don't overheat like 30mm cannons do. I still really love this platform, but for this whole line, you sacrifice so much for that great maneuverability, and maneuverability can be countered by simply flying away. I mean, yeah. So you can counter the flying away with great maneuverability. Like if I see heavy fighters coming in, I know I can outmaneuver their shots, but if they get a good shot on me, it doesn't matter how maneuverable I am. I could potentially be dead. So to me, this line, I went down this line after I went down the Spitfire. I would definitely recommend the Spitfire line over this line. That being said, if you love turn fighters, like this is the turniest of the turn fighters, you can definitely own sectors. And an A7M will own a sector no matter what comes up against it at tier 7. I've got more aces in my A7M than any other plane in the game. But it's not, it's too one-dimensional to be entertaining for me, in my humble opinion. But it does dive off, and then you get multi-rolls at the end. Now these are really, really maneuverable multi-roll planes, as you would expect from any of the Japanese planes. Have really hard-hitting cannons, and at tier 10, you actually get a decent amount of speed. In my opinion, the whole line, the best plane is this tier 9 J7W2, and the reason being is because it kind of hits a sweet spot of great maneuverability, good enough airspeed, and the cannons are stupid good on this plane. The 30mm cannons are basically the same 30mm type cannons that you have on the German heavy fighters at tier 9 and tier 10. These hit so hard, and because you've got just enough maneuverability, you can get behind people, or get your guns on target, I should say, quick enough that you can surprise so many people with the guns on this particular plane. The J7W1's 30mm cannons are really short range, and so they let it... You're not a jet, you're still a rear-ended prop plane, so you can't necessarily get those guns on target as well, so this can be a little bit frustrating. Still a solid platform, but the W2 just kind of hits such a sweet spot in such a really well-rounded plane. It's got 2 bombs, that's what makes it the multi-roll. Those bombs are really supplemental. They're not going to necessarily flip sectors with them, but if you just need something to knock out just a little bit more, they're very helpful. The W3 is just more of the same. So I mean, let's take a quick look at the aircraft details here, and you see there's not a huge jump up in stats. It's the same exact guns, same exact bombs, a little bit more hit points, but nothing that's going to be changing the gameplay. The airspeed is faster, but it's not so noticeably faster that you're wow, oh my goodness. The maneuverability is better, but again, it's not so incredibly better. And again, you would expect that. You're going from tier 9 to tier 10. The overall impact of these metrics is so small. The overall impact of those metrics is so small that, yeah, the tier 10 is definitely a better overall plane, but tier for tier, I think the tier 9 is the better. I'd rather play at this tier 9 at tier 9 than this tier 10 at tier 10. So many other tier 10 planes make such a huge jump in metrics that this tier 9 I think is just a more solid performer. So again, kind of a meh line. A lot of consistency as far as gameplay. I mean, if you're good at the tier 2, you're going to be good at the tier 7 in my opinion, and then it kind of jumps Wonkadoo. But you know, it's got its shining moments. On the middle of both of these, at tier 5, you get some really different heavy planes, I guess I'll say. Very maneuverable, the most maneuverable heavy planes in the game. Really strong frontal cannons, and you get a rear gunner on each of these planes. The rear gunner is kind of lame because he can't aim anywhere below like the horizon. And so if you've got a plane below you, like, you're just going to get torn up. Yeah, you're really maneuverable, but again, that's got a quantifier of being really maneuverable for a heavy plane. So you can surprise some planes, but I mean, if somebody's on your butt, you're still gonna die. You lose a lot of airspeed compared to other heavy lines, but you've got that flexibility of the maneuverability and the hard-hitting cannons. The Key 93 is probably the least liked of these, but in my opinion, it can have the most impact. The Key 45 and the Key 102 have a lot of that flexibility, have really good, consistent cannons. You know what? You've got your 20mm cannons. You've got this 157mm cannon that just kind of takes chunks out of things, and then the 20mm consistent cannons, right? You've got a couple bombs. Again, much like the multi-role planes, you know, over here, the bombs are kind of just there to supplement. It's not really going to do much for actually flipping. Key 93, though, has a stupid cannon on it, and actually both cannons are good, but this cannon is super long range. You've got your two 20mm cannons for, like, you know, just taking out consistent damage, but you can snipe, like, literally straight up snipe with the Key 93, and it's so satisfying when the 57mm cannon hits. People that are just should not be being engaged you're 4,000 feet away, so they're not even thinking about you. And when you hit with that cannon and take out half their hit points or 2/3 of their hit points, it's just like nice. Yeah, so it doesn't really. It's all of these planes on the heavy line. They don't really fit a niche that the American and German heavies, and even for that matter, the British heavies fit. They kind of fit a different niche, almost to the point of multi-rolls, but not quite. So I mean, they've got their own gameplay style, which is nice, but they're definitely not what you would call what I would think of as like the normal heavies as the Americans and Germans. So, but they're a lot of fun still. So yeah, I hope this helps. I wasn't overly impressed, to be honest. The most impressive part of the Japanese tech tree to me is the heavies. The airplanes, in my opinion, I mean, they've got their strong suits for sure, but I think there's better planes and better plane lines than the light fighter lines in this game. That being said, like the A7M I've got more aces in the A7M than any other plane in the game. If I need an ace, I go take out the A7M, and I feel very comfortable that I'll go ahead and get that. There's definitely some unique and fun gameplay with the J7Ws, and again with the heavy fighters here. So hope that gives a little bit of perspective with the types of planes that you can look forward to on these particular lines. If you've got any questions about a tech tree and a detail about a specific plane, feel free to reach out to me, either in the comments. Your best bet would be in Discord though, and otherwise I hope you have a great day. Thanks for joining me. Bye.